So I want to address one of the uh, bigger Star Wars fan theories that seems to have gotten a lot of traction in recent weeks, especially since the Rise of Skywalker trailer came out. Now, I'm not someone that's big on fan theories, mostly because they're a dime a dozen. They're whether it be for Avengers or Game of Thrones or Star Wars, fan theories are everywhere, and you can't really take a lot of them seriously because, to be honest, a lot of them just don't pan out. Some do, but most of them don't. Snoke, the million and one Snoke theories from Last Jedi that didn't pan out is a perfect example, and people really got pissed about that. So I don't typically spend a lot of time giving them much credence. Now, there is one fan theory that seems to have gotten a lot of traction in recent weeks that actually it caught my attention. So much so that I started thinking about it, and I thought maybe it's possible. Maybe this theory isn't that far fetched, and it has to do with Palpatine. And as of course, if you haven't already seen the trailer, but I'm sure you have by now, and if you haven't, what are you doing? There's a new Star Wars trailer coming out, and you haven't seen it? Go watch it. After the stream, of course. But we know by now Palpatine's voice is heard laughing at the end of the Rise of Skywalker trailer with the shot of the big ruined piece of Death Star that looks like, I would assume, that's an ocean or some spot on one of the moons of Endor, I would assume. So everybody's like, oh, crazy things that Palpatine's coming back. It's this crazy notion. Everybody thought he was gone. Nobody ever expected him to return. Now he seems like he's coming back. Now, the theory that I've heard so far, or the theory that I think that is very, I guess you would call it Snoke-esque in its nature because of the fact that people have gotten behind it so much, has to do with Palpatine and possibly his relationship with Rey. Now, it's not going to be like Palpatine's Rey's daddy or something like that, although I have heard that. It has to do with this. So, the theory goes that Palpatine, in Return of the Jedi, when he says the line, "Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen," did not have to do with Luke and Vader and the events in Return of the Jedi. The theory states that it actually is referring to what will come later on between Ben or Kylo and Rey, and that Palpatine had foreseen everything. He knew that Vader was going to betray him. He knew he wasn't going to be able to. He wasn't going to be able to turn Luke. He knew the Death Star was going to get destroyed. He knew he was going to die. All of that. So what he's referring to is the fact that he would eventually be victorious later on in the timeline, basically years later during the events of Rise of Skywalker. And I thought that was an interesting theory. I thought, okay, maybe. Is he really playing the long game and we never knew it up until now? And has this all really been part of his plan? Because if you play the Star Wars games, you find out that he was instrumental in actually relaunching the First Order, and that's all essentially an extension of the Empire. And I thought that was a pretty cool theory, and it seemed to make sense. But here's why, and I hate to break it to you, fanboys and fangirls out there. Here's why that theory is going to be like Snoke. It's not going to happen. It's not going to pan out, and it just doesn't make sense to do it. So you can give up on that theory right now, and I'll tell you why. So last weekend, I was out of town, and we were in a hotel, and it just so happens that Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi was on cable. I think it was on like TBS or something. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and it's actually towards the end of the film where Palpatine is doing his thing. And you know what? Just as a side note, I'm going to take a little moment here as a side note to give props to Ian McDiarmid. This guy took a character that Lucas gave him very little direction on, didn't talk to him about his voice, his performance, anything that we know about Palpatine that makes up that character. It was virtually non-existent in Empire Strikes Back, and it was played by a different character in the original trilogy before the special effects or the special editions changed it. So you know what? He does not get enough credit for creating and crafting that character of the Emperor. This is before the prequels really introduced him more and he had more of a role. Ian McDiarmid came to that role, and what he brought to Palpatine, he deserves a lot of credit for, because he essentially crafted and created that character. He's such a great character, even more badass than Vader. He's such a menacing, threatening character that his legacy has lived on now through 3 different trilogies. He was at the end of the original trilogy, then, of course, his story unfolds in the prequel trilogy, and now it looks like he's back in the new trilogy, just on the tail end. And we just found out that there's even more Star Wars movies announced, so we don't know what the future holds there. So, you know what? Props to him for what he brought to that role. But here's my point about Return of the Jedi and why the new Palpatine theory is not going to work. So I'm watching the film, and I know this theory is in my head, and now I'm watching Return of the Jedi through a different kind of set of eyes. I'm watching it with that theory in the back of my mind, trying to make it work, trying to retrocon it into the continuity. And as I watched Return of the Jedi, I realized that theory absolutely does not work. Number one, the reason Palpatine is not playing the long game is you can clearly see his interactions with Luke and how he's trying to turn him. It does not make sense for Palpatine to be doing what he's doing in Return of the Jedi if he knows that his plans are folly, that they're not going to work out, and that he's not going to be victorious until decades later. It doesn't work. If you watch Return of the Jedi, you can clearly see he is actively trying to turn Luke. His plan is for Luke to kill his father, so he wants to get rid of Vader, and he wants Luke to be the ultimate powerful Skywalker at his side that he's always hoped for. He hoped he had that in Anakin, but obviously through the events of Episode 3, that didn't happen. So he wants Luke. He absolutely wants Luke. So if his mind is on Rey, Return of the Jedi makes no sense. So there's really no good way to retrofit that current theory into the past timeline. It just doesn't work. And I'm sorry, it's a neat thought, but just be happy that we got Palpatine back at all. I know I am. So that's going to be great seeing him. But trying to tie it up into the original series is not going to make sense, providing that they respect the original timeline. Now, of course, we know that has not always happened, and Rian Johnson kind of screwed the pooch on Last Jedi. Mark Hamill's been very vocal about his problems with a lot of that. But now we know that the higher ups at Disney and at Lucasfilm, and a lot of people are looking at Kathleen Kennedy, they're kind of giving her some of the hate that they gave Lucas, in the sense that, look, this is off the rails. But we know we have J.J. Abrams back in the driver's seat. We know he respects the continuity. We know that he has a love for the original trilogy. So if he continues on in the way that he has written and produced these Star Wars films, and don't forget, not only did he do, he did a really great job in Force Awakens laying the groundwork, and the story goes, and I have no reason to question this, he actually did an outline for the second and third films when he knew he was going to have to hand it off. And the people that came after him literally crumpled it up and threw it away, did not follow anything. That's why Last Jedi seems to do a complete 180 on everything and dumps a lot of really important stuff and goes in a completely different direction. So it's going to be J.J. Abrams' job to kind of bring that back around and try to salvage that and tie this up into a nice little bow. I don't think he's then going to try to rewrite what we saw in one of the most beloved Star Wars films ever. If you ask anyone, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? It's going to be 9 times out of 10, especially people of my age, it's going to be 2 responses. It's either going to be Empire or Jedi. And J.J. Abrams, I don't believe, is going to go back and screw with that. So I'm sorry. It's a cool theory, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it, because it just ain't going to happen.